All right, thank you everyone for joining this expert panel on where digital meets lean. We're very excited to have 6 expert manufacturing professionals here today to chat about this important topic. Just a few housekeeping notes before we dive in. If you have any questions, please submit them in the question bar in the Zoom platform. We'll make sure to get to as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, we'll make sure to have someone follow up with you after the session. We'll also be sharing a recording of this session within the next 24 hours. So please be on the lookout for that. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Prasad Akella, who is the founder and chairman of Drishti, to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Erin. Indeed, an expert panel, and as you'll see very soon here in a minute, a global panel. I'm Prasad. I'm the founder chairman of Drishti, and it's a total pleasure to be hosting today Professor Jeff Leiker, professor at the University of Michigan, my alma mater, joining us from Ann Arbor. Jeff is the author of more books than I can count, but particularly of relevance to us is The Toyota Way. He spent many decades studying Toyota and the lean process and Toyota production system. And as every time I talk to him, I walk away saying, oh my God, there's so much more I learned from the conversation. So I'm hoping that happens today as well. Marcos Paganini is the VP of Global Manufacturing Strategy at Johnson & Johnson, the 90 billion pharma giant. And he joins us from Lausanne, Switzerland. He oversees the end-to-end supply chain optimization for Johnson & Johnson. And in his decades at Fiat, McKinsey, and Newell Rubbermaid, has built a perspective that I totally enjoyed when I was chatting with him in advance of this call. So I look forward to Marcos having some very interesting comments to say. Next up is Max Urbini. Max joins us from Geneva, Switzerland, and he's at the $18 billion med tech giant Becton Dickinson. He drives their lean and digital transformation programs. And over his several decades in automotive, in consumer goods, consumer electronics, and medical devices, Fiat, Philips, Unilever, and Johnson & Johnson as well, has insights that I'm absolutely looking forward to today. Joining us with a different perspective from South America is Eduardo Fonseca, who is the CEO of Americas for the Prometeon Tire Group, probably better known as a spin-off from Pirelli, the Italian tire giant. It's a billion-dollar company. Eduardo joins us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And while the company got going in 2017 as a spin-off, he's been there since 2019 and comes to them with extensive supply chain lean experiences from companies like Ford, Dana, Pirelli, and Johnson & Johnson. And next up there is Rogerio Pacheco. Rogerio joins us from Mondelez, which is a food and beverage company, so slightly different perspective coming into this for us. It's a $26 billion company, and he leads their manufacturing transformation efforts. Deep background in Toyota production system, including from within Japan, and has worked for companies like Unilever and Danone. And I think with that, we've got, as I said, a phenomenal panel. My interactions with them suggest that we're going to have some interesting conversations. And so I want to launch off into the conversation for today, which is around this interaction between digital and lean. And Jeff, I think I'm going to start off with you, specifically with 3 quotes that I sort of stuck with me as I read your book once more recently, the book, The Toyota Way. The first quote says, improving the right process is how you get sustainable benefits. The second is building people and problem-solving culture is key. And always supplement the system information with Genchi Genbutsu or go look and see. So I want to juxtapose these 3 quotes against the fundamental thesis behind digitization, that it enables process improvement and delivers sustainable benefits. So I guess my question is, how do lean and digital manufacturing work together in the facilities of our audience today? And how do we create value, not electronic wallpaper?
Okay. Well, first of all, starting with the manual process, Toyota's vision is continuous flow, one-piece flow. And their vision is that the transformation of your raw materials, your inputs into something the customer wants, they would like that to happen step by step with a lot of value added and very little waste. Very little, for example, inventory interrupting things, machines breaking down, defects causing problems. At the same time, they understand that that's impossible to do perfectly all the time, and there will always be problems. So it becomes critical that people close to the process are observing deviations from the standard and correcting the deviations. And they do that through training people very extensively, deeply every day in problem solving. And in fact, your boss is your coach who's teaching you problem solving. So with that process working, and part of the problem solving process is really understanding what's happening and what the causes are. So that means in Toyota's case, go to the Gemba, go and see firsthand. When you add digital to that, there's two things that could happen, one good and one bad. The good thing is that you have now more information, real-time information, and you can see problems more clearly with higher resolution more quickly. That's the good thing. And the bad thing that can happen is that people think the technology is going to solve the problem, and therefore they stop thinking and stop going to the Gemba. And so what Toyota thinks about is that in most cases, there are some digital technologies that actually will directly adjust the equipment and fix themselves without intervention. But in most cases, the technology is like an andon where they pull the cord and there's a problem, and it alerts you that there's a problem. When you know there's a problem, Toyota still wants their people to go and see themselves, to see in detail what the real cause is, and then solve the problem at the root cause. So when you have that combination of people engaged at the shop floor who are there already, which includes the team members doing the work, when they're well trained in problem solving and they have better information in real time, and they can respond appropriately by solving the problem, seeing the real problem, understanding the root cause, putting in place a countermeasure, seeing it through, checking what happens. That combination is very powerful. But they don't want the computer systems to replace thinking. The other thing is that in real time, when you're performing work, and many things are coming at you at once, and the world is very dynamic, manufacturing is very dynamic, then you want the most critical information to be extremely clear. So another potential problem of digital technologies is there's so much information. You can go down, you can dig down into screens, and that's pretty cool for demonstration purposes. But in practice, you want to see the right information now. It's green, yellow, red. Here's the problem, I see it, and I want to react immediately. So too much information is actually harmful.
Gentlemen, too much information is harmful. How do you deal with all this information coming down the pike? How do you see this working together?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking the group right now, picking up. You said too much information can make people stop thinking. So I'm just curious how our colleagues here practice this on the shop floor.
Well, that's the thing is that, well, this is not a new problem, right? It's being, of course, exacerbated with technology now, right? Because it's more affordable, it's more connected, it's more powerful. So we end up having much more data, right? So data is everywhere, right? So devices are connected everywhere, including to our human bodies, right? So, and this avalanche of data is then factories are bombarding our people, right, with all this data, right? So I give an example, right? So we always measure OE, right, equipment efficiency, right? And what we would do, right? I even know my early days, you would do, right, process mapping, measure the time, and once a day or once a week, you would come with your OE and equipment. Now you can do that real time. You can do real time, anytime, right? You can. It's so easy to connect your devices and get that through the cloud and see that every time. So, and actually most companies embarked in that situation. And then you end up having, supplying, right, tons of graphs of OEE to your operators and supervisors, no, on an hourly basis. So what can they do with that? That's the point, right? It's really detrimental, no? Because not only they can't do anything, but second, it is really overwhelming, no? It distracts people, right, from the focus, no? So what we need to do, and that's what we stepped back, right, in Johnson & Johnson, what we were doing, and now we're restarting again, and we say, no, we need to supply, valuable insights, and not data. And so we are now removing all those visualizations and say, well, they don't need to see the OE on hour by hour. What they need to see are deviations of drivers, right? Whether it is a temperature or a product conformity, you name it, right? And we need to supply that so that people know the drivers of potential OEE deviations, no? So we as designers, we need to think about drivers and not data, and that's how we've been addressing change.
Rosales, Eduardo, I think I have just a comment on this. Is not every company is Toyota, no? So one of the situations I have seen companies I worked before and now some of my competitors as well in the tire industry is because we are not fully preparing the same level of the Toyota way, the Toyota standards. The technology sometimes can be harmful for us because the basics are not fully embedded in the organization yet. So what's happening is some of the companies, and I had to stop that in my current job, is some companies are spending time and money to bring technology, and the technology is not a matter of how to use to create the report, is how to evaluate the report, like Marcos was saying. So it's like one of the issues we have is one of the plants with 3,000 people we have in Brazil is are we absolutely sure the people, mainly the supervisors, the team leaders, are we absolutely sure they fully understand the value of that data is coming through the TV or the screen in the production line? So what we are doing right now is stepping back, actually 2 steps back, to make sure that the team is fully aware for the basics and the concepts and the values of the data is coming through. And after that, we are going to bring the technology and a speed that we believe is the right way to create the value to the customer. Because in the end, it's like Professor said, it's a one piece flow, and the customer doesn't want to know if we have technology or not. The customer wants the product in the right window of time and the right cost, and that's it, and the right quality. That's what.
Eduardo, if I can comment, complementing what Eduardo is saying. Now, I know it sounds very simple, but again, what are you using the technology for? No? So when you start about what is the business value, sometimes you definitely, there is this element of people trying to use information, trying to use technology for some areas that perhaps is not that relevant for the business right now. So asking ourselves which part of the business you're trying to focus, which kind of value you want to bring. So you see Marcos talking about let's call it asset performance. Maybe Eduardo is bringing other elements, perhaps on quality for our customers, etc. So I guess a very first step, even before we start really digging down into the world of digital and data, it's I think what Professor mentioned at the beginning, the elimination of losses. So that brings this element. What are we trying to solve? What's the business value that you have? So from that starting point, you can be very much more laser focused and really trying to identify what data is really relevant to solve either an issue or to manage their day-to-day routine. I think this is a very important element, although it sounds very simple, but because people are much more on the data kind of mining element, and data being the new fuel for the industry. Now people want to use data, but I think there's a very step back to say, well, why are you using this for? What's the value that you're bringing in?
And building on what Rogerio, sorry, Prasad to say, is saying, just to add one thing, is this is exactly the digital is a people-driven transformation. You cannot design an OE system or any digital solution without starting with the involvement of the team who's going to use it, because otherwise this is not going to land. And they need to shape, obviously, the solution based on the problem they intend to solve and based on their experience. So it's very much important, building on what, just the colleague said, in my experience, making sure that this is starting with the team and ending with the team. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. The team is going to reject that. I've seen in my experience OE systems that, with great technology that, never used by the team because they were not meeting their expectation and not fitting with their needs.
So what I've taken away from this is, first start with the clarity on the business problem, then pull the data that is actually helping people solve that. So give them the relevant data, not gobs of data, but relevant data. Figure out the problem solving technique, make the people a critical part of this process, and you need to train them along the way, is roughly what I've taken away. So I want to start digging into some of these questions if we can go down that path. I want to start, Max, with you. The more I learned about TPS and Lean, the more I'm struck by the cleverness, if I can use such a word, of its creators. They didn't have as much data as we have today, yet they use simple techniques and heuristics to eliminate all the variation measurements that we see when you run any experimental system to get accurate insights. And we just spoke about insights a minute ago. So the question I'd like to have you tease out, Max, is when you have this plethora of data, and I know that Eduardo talks about 73 projects that he's running right now, pumping out data. We'll get to that in a minute. How does Lean change all of that? What are you doing on the plant floor to change the use of this kind of volume of data coming through?
No, it's a great question, and it's very connected to the comments that the colleagues were making before. So I tell you my experience for sure in the last few years. So I think Lean is going to be definitely, augmented and accelerated by these tools, right? We have enormous opportunities in data sensing, acquisition, and analytics to create those insights. And this is going to drive acceleration if done in the way that we just discussed. I want to make an example of what does it mean, augmentation in my experience, right? And acceleration. So, for example, when you have a filling line of a bottle, okay, and you have different nozzles. One of the issues that typically companies face in filling bottles is the amount of overfill, which depends on, obviously, on the performance of the nozzle, okay? So without any digital tool, this may not be immediately visible. If you want to do a sort of process capability, you need to go and spend that. We used to do that, right? Measure individually the amount of liquid fill into individual bottles and see then any deviation that each individual nozzle may have, and then correct the issue, which maybe could be related to maintenance, autonomous, by the operators or with the technical team, right? Well, as a matter of fact, in terms of data acquisition today, you can easily extract, ingest those data, make them available, right, to the supervisors, and see if there is any deviation in amount of filling, per nozzle. So, this simple visualization is driving an augmentation because it's triggering an action, right? So it's triggering an action and then a resolution. Other experience, I had was in a similar space was a little bit about, you have in a high-speed line minor stops, right? Today, minor stop is a big, in all my life, always seen as a big issue, okay? So having now this, cameras that through artificial intelligence can record the line, but just when there is a minor stop, select and capture, the frames and make them available at the end of the shift or, during the shift to process engineers so they can go and analyze that. So this is a form of augmentation and acceleration, right? And to a certain extent, just to conclude a little bit, now building on what Professor Leike was also saying, think about 4M analysis, right? So, the principle of lean remains, but, if you can sense the process, you can go with, the right approach, with the problem clearly in mind, with the team, to visualize the phenomena, sense and get the data, structure, right? And understand by the phenomena, you can definitely, make your problem solving more effective instead of spending a lot of time in guessing on what the problem may look like. I'm not sure, it may be a little bit of a provocation in terms of how the tool set is going to evolve in lean, right? Principle is going to stay and the approach is going to stay, but tool set is going to be transformed, right? So this is a little bit my experience. And I think we have yet a lot to learn in this space, honestly.
Yeah, and Max, let me comment on that, because I don't think it's a lot on the what, it's really on the how. Because and to be provocative as well, right? Many developments I've seen in my company and outside, many times the leading function for such developments is IT, right? Of course, they can't do it, right? So they need to be fantastic enablers, right? But if you give to IT to develop these digital solutions, they will think about abundance, right? So the more KPIs I can give and the faster I can give, the better, right? They don't think about process. No, and here it's the concept of automating the waste, right? We end up automating waste because we don't have process people and customer connected business people, right? To see what is needed, right? And I always say, right, and you probably heard me saying before when we worked together, right? Less is beautiful, right? The less is better, right? So how many times we go to a factory and you see 35 KPIs, right? So we don't need all that to manage a factory, right? And continue on the technology thing. Technology must unite and not divide. I give examples, right? I remember in the past when Eduardo and I worked together, and he put in place a fantastic dashboard, war room, typical lean, right, with visual management, where people would go and put the results and discuss the results and have interaction when they would see the results, right, from a performance element. No, and then we decided to put this electronically, right, which what we called at that time, Eduardo, a planned cockpit, right? So actually, we turned out to be a slave of the system, and we reduced interaction, which is the beauty of the system, right? The visual management system is all about bringing interaction, right? And continuous improvement and problem solving, right? So you put a digital screen and all of a sudden you have something in between, right? The human interaction. That's one example. And I just finished with a second one because that's the information world. And then you have the physical one. So we all know that transportation.
Marcus, can you go back for a second? I didn't fully catch.
Yes.
I think I heard you say you became a slave of the system. Did I hear you say that?
Yes, we shouldn't be slave of systems, right? That's what I said.
Thank you. Please keep
okay. Yeah, and I just want to continue on the physical world as well, right? So we all know that handling transportation is muda, right? It's waste, right? So we should work to reduce it and to eliminate it, right? And then we come with sophisticated conveyors or cobots and mobots, right? You have all these sophisticated things. No, what happens? Of course, I'm not diminishing the value, right? Because sometimes you need and it's important. But if you don't do that well, again, not only you create, you are automating waste because it's a transportation, but also you are dividing, right? Before, the internal supplier of a process would come and talk to the subsequent process, right? And say, oh, how is the quality? How things are going? Do you need more products? Through communication or through Kanban cards and the like. Now, once you put that technology in the middle, you lose that interaction, and you lose that connection and that signal that the steps need, right? So we need to be very careful, right? Whether it is physical or information, that the technology must unite and not divide. That's my point. Okay.
Jeff, you've studied this for a long, long time. Technology must unite, not divide, and not be an additional layer between two people talking about the process. Have you seen any interesting things happen in this space?
Well, one is in the Toyota plant in the United Kingdom, and the end-on is very critical, and people talk about pulling the end-on, stopping the line, and how it emphasizes quality matters because even the worker can stop the line. But that's really not the point of the end-on. The point of the end-on is to surface problems, is to make visible, I have a problem. This is not going as I expected. I'm not able to follow the standard work, so you pull the cord. Even if I could solve the problem myself and keep running, I want to register that there was a problem. Then at the end of the day, you want the work groups to review what happened. And the end-on is great data. We had this number of line stops here. This is where they happened. Pareto chart, create a Pareto chart. This is their causes the problem, and then pick something to solve. So that's what should be happening with the end-on. At one point, a young engineer developed a computer system to take all the end-on data and put it on the computer. And it was really cool. And you could dig down several layers and you could see a process level, or when a given person does it, or by shift, where the end-on pulls were. And they got very excited about that in the plant. And then the Toyota production system expert in the plant noticed that people weren't solving problems as much. And the reason was because the computer didn't really tell them the root cause. It just told them, here is where the problems were. There was 5 stops at this station. So they redesigned the system and they piloted it in one department. And in the system, when there's an end-on pull, the job of the team leader is to immediately write down the cause and have a record of that. And at the end of the day, they by hand develop a Pareto chart. And the visual system can tell them where there's a problem. There was a bunch of problems at this station when this person was doing this work. But then they also have the information on the causes that's manual. And then they can have a discussion about that. So between the two, it's been working out, and they had to go through the whole plant and retrain everybody in this new process. And they may have a very nice visual system. So the point was that I think the important point is that they were paying attention. I think too often when we rapidly deploy technology very broadly across many plants, nobody's really paying attention to study what actually happens at the Gemba, what's actually going on. How is this information being used? Is it separating or is it bringing together? And that in Toyota, they did that. They actually go and they look and they study. And the person who was the TPS guy who was making this change, he started as a shop floor worker. So he knew the Gemba very well.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yes, I want to take a slight deviation here for a minute. You said the tool sets will grow. It's about augmenting, it's about problem solving, and about creating value. If I can take a slight detour for a second and look at it from a narrower perspective of Drishti. And Max, you spoke very briefly about a camera. When you have these different camera systems of all sorts, whether it's ours or anybody else's, how do you folks think about value and value creation, problem solving in this context? Because that is an increasingly big source of data flowing in through the plants.
I will speak for the tire industry now. I think not just Pirelli or Prometeon and also the other companies I think we are most of the companies are using technology just to speed up the problem solving process, making sure it has a more robust output of the problem solving. And also alignment, because once you have the clear data to everybody, it's much easier to align the team and make sure that everybody is aligned on the solution and the answer to that specific problem. So this is happening right now, maybe cameras, and also I think bringing the data in terms of bringing charts or the statistical process getting much faster in the front of the employees. This is helping for problem solving. But does not like Mark said, we cannot become slaves of the screen now. So we have to make sure that all the data is analyzed and the people behind the screen understand what's coming through. So, but definitely it's big help. Definitely a big help.
Yeah, what I see, I agree with you, Edu, because if done well, we can move from static systems to dynamic systems, right? So if you take one base of Lean is PDCA, right? So we all apply PDCA, and then you have DMake, you have Six Sigma, but at the end of the day, it's all the same, right? So you go through a thought process that you study your problem, you experiment, you deploy, and then you scale, right? So what is the problem of the PDCA in big corporations like J&J, right? Is that, hey, in my network, we have 30 manufacturing sites, 300 external suppliers, thousands of people, regions and situations and the like. So the problem of the manual and static PDCA is that the knowledge remains local. Now, it's very difficult. And by the way, we tried many times in different ways, right? To have collaborative pools and COEs and community of practices and, you know, share. It doesn't work, right? Because it's too many things. It's too overwhelming. So where I see, as an example, right, is that if you, by using the same logic of PDCA, in this very simple example, using the same approach of people-generated, cross-functional, and the like, and if you can create that in a dynamic way, connecting your devices and your information to provide better insights as part of your P, and then once you have solutions, that goes into a repository of solutions, no? And that can be easily available and visible to all the other people, right? When in the future you are doing something, if that intelligent system can connect to what you did before without human intervention, right? And bring that knowledge, right? So it's powerful, right? You see where I'm going, right? Because it's using the same simple logic, but in a much more powerful way, not faster, not only faster, which is faster, but much more insightful, right? And the scaling, which is the A of the PDCA, happens in a much stronger and faster way as well, right? So just give an example of how technology can enable static systems based off Lean, and there are many other examples around that. No?
And on the other way around, if I can build on that, you know, digitally is augmenting, is accelerating, but we have to be careful on the sequence, because not only we don't solve the problem, but we generate costs. You know, I talk about maintenance, at least in my experience, you know, in the last 3-4 years, everybody's talking about predictive maintenance, okay? Say IoT sensors are cheap, then you can drive analytics. Still, you don't know which models are behind these analytics. If you outsource that, you're going to pay a monthly or yearly fee, which is significantly there. You don't know how much you save, you know how much you pay. But then the question is, do you really need to be predictive in certain situations if your problem statement in that case is contamination? If you have accelerated deterioration because you don't maintain the machine, you have oil or dust, you know, I mean, it's useless to use predictive maintenance capability. So the principle behind TPM and the sequential steps to get to a predictive model at the very end remain. Then obviously today versus 20 years ago, certainly with IoT sensor and cloud-based technology, yes, we can get predictive model as a service, but this needs to be really, you know, driven by those Lean principles I go to say, because this is going to have cost. Are going to have cost.
If I can add Max, quickly, I don't know, Prasad, just
30 seconds,
comments.
30 seconds on your comment.
Yeah, no, I love the comment from Max on the predictive element, no, because people normally talk about predictive without the foundational elements. The only thing predictive is going to tell you, perhaps when the component is going to break, but the cycle between breaks, there's always going to happen because the foundational elements are not there, as you mentioned. No? So I love the comment you're making about the foundations being in place so you can actually leverage technology. Otherwise, this is not going to bring you the benefit that you have. You
Very
after.
true. Very true. So I'm going to actually take this conversation in a slightly different direction for a bit here. Edward, I'm going to come to you for this one. I'll admit, I was shocked to hear you're running 73 projects across your facilities, IoT projects. And I guess the question is, given what we've talked about so far, driving value, bringing people in, making sure that you're actually distilling the most important, how do you make up your mind both about which projects you want to work on? And then second, probably of great interest to the community here, is do you do this yourself or do you bring in third parties?
Now, out of the 73 projects, basically 90% is done by startups outside the company now. So we are using a lot of startup bases, and everything started 2 years ago when we took the decision to put our guys or data engineering, not in-house, but sitting in incubators. So once the moment that we put our guys sitting in incubators, data engineers, they start learning, sitting next to each other, with other companies, also with the startups, and finding potential solutions to our business. So maybe 65 of these projects that we have been performing right now with startups. Some of them are very easy. There are small projects, and we are cross-fertilizing these across all the departments. And some of the projects are big. So I can give you an example. A project that's going on right now with a Brazilian startup is that we are trying to predict the price of a natural rubber in Asia a year before through meteorological information and transportation costs, et cetera. And we are going to be able to change our formulas in our mixers to have the lowest cost on the compound that goes with it in the tire production. So we are basically truck tire manufacturing. For trucks, everything is about performance. And we have to make sure the compound it gives the mileage needed, but we make sure that we provide this to the customer at the lowest cost, and how material is very critical. So this is a typical example that we could never make in-house, we are making outside. And to support these projects, we had to build a team that is end-to-end team. So we have representatives of all the areas. We built we call data engineering team, and this team sits together outside the company in an incubator, and they go through opportunities for our business that goes from supply base, transportation, up to commercial. And commercial is the area that I can tell you, I came from operations and I become a CEO of the company, and the commercial area is lots of opportunities for automation and data gathering and decisions made on data. It's still a lot of commercial feeling, et cetera. And we are trying to change that, making sure the commercial people, and we are training those people in hackathons and et cetera. We are making sure the commercial people are taking the decisions based on data, which is a major turnaround. So 73 projects, yes, busy. The team is fully focused. We have specific people on data engineering, but some of the projects are small, medium, and big ones. So it's busy, but so far we have created between 2 and 4 million euro savings per year for us, which is for us, for $1 billion company, is a good amount of money. This is net.
Very nice. And maybe the others can comment on your projects and your selection and in-house outsource.
We basically see the agility and the capacity of that specific outsider to provide us a solution. Most of the time they have experience. They have done that somewhere else or in a different segment, even it's not tire industry, automotive. They have done in food or in pharmaceutical, and we try to adapt that to our environment. So we look a lot of the speed for the solution that specific provider can give it to us. And also this translates in agility, how much we can provide this.
So a question to the rest of you is, do you do this in-house or do you do this, just quick show of hands, what fraction are done in-house?
Very small.
Very small in-house.
Yeah, majority is it's external, and perhaps for those who work in big corporations like ourselves in Mondelez, we normally tend to really understand the business drivers for the overall benefit for the business, and we allocate projects in different regions, in different parts of the world, and monitor that very closely. And just building your comment, Marcus, you made before about rolling, pushing things down. We actually try a very new approach where we actually moving towards a pool. No? So if people actually see this information that is available and actually validated system, so people do have the opportunity to pool the solutions rather than being a top-down push from the organization. So in that sense, we are giving, let's say, to accelerate the process in a way, freedom and the framework, let's call it, so people can actually develop this, as you said, normally with external, and you monitor this very closely globally, so you can actually put this in a, let's call it in a knowledge management organization, so people can pull it, and we are actually encouraging much more on that sense rather than push down the solutions to let's call it to our business units or our factories.
Good.
I have, Prasad, I have a slightly.
I'm going to go to Jeff for a minute here. Jeff,
Okay, sorry.
your work, your interviews with people like Raja at Denso suggested a diametrically opposite view, which is
Yeah, so I was thinking about it. So in the case of Denso, they first went outside, they went from vendor to vendor of technology and wanted to see an actual example of where they had success. Then they went to that operation, and when they went and saw, in most cases, the technology wasn't working the way the vendor said. And then they came up with the term electronic wallpaper to say that we've got great.
back. Let's keep going.
So what Raja and Denso concluded is that they need to take control internally, and they set up a small group internally. But I think that, obviously there's expertise outside and with a lot of experience. I think the key is this idea of pull that we heard, to me, means that who's responsible? Because the technology, the goal is not to implement the technology, the goal is to get results and to solve real problems.
Mm-hmm.
So who's responsible for that? And I think the responsibility has to lie inside the company. And the vendor has to be thought about as an expert on the tools, who's teaching and working with the internal group, but the internal group has to be in the lead, has to be responsible and accountable. And so I like this pull idea where I'm pulling this technology. I'm going to be responsible. I'm responsible for my operation. I have a clear idea of what my goals are, what the purpose is. I have an understanding of my organization and the people and the problems we face. And I'm using the technology vendor as a resource, but I'm not waiting for the technology vendor to deliver the solutions and results.
I like that framing. I like that framing. So the company's in charge. It knows what problems. It's using the resources available to it. Love that. I'm looking at the clock here. So I'm going to go to the Q&A. We have so much more to talk about, but we need to get to the Q&A. So Erin, maybe I can request you to flag the questions that have been coming through. Erin, are you there? Okay, Erin lost audio is what it says. It's funny that I think people are commenting on a technology company and having challenges of this sort. So let me start. Maybe I lost all the questions that had come through in the previous session. So yeah. I'm going to have to go off of what I recall. I'm going to go to a question that I remember seeing there was around culture. How should we think about culture as we think about these projects? I know you've talked about training, about people, because that's the center of all of this. Any thoughts on culture?
That is a central point, right?
Yeah.
It's always right what we like to say, that the soft side is the hard side, right? It is the central point, right? I tell you, very few companies will be and even need or want to be Toyota, right? So that's the first thing, right? The fact that we say we want to implement lean systems doesn't mean that you want to be or that you need to be Toyota, right? So you're never going to be, right? And you see, I work for Johnson & Johnson. We don't do TPS, but it's a very successful company. There are many different ways to be successful, right? Companies have principles, protocols, hierarchy, centralization, decentralization, autonomy, non-autonomy, right? Trust, and all these elements. So it is for me a central point, right?
Good. On that note, Marcos, my time handlers are saying that we need to take this forward. I totally agree with you that culture is the key. And in the next 1 minute, I want all of us to pick up a question that Erin's going to bring up here. If you had 1 minute each, if you had a minute with your CEO on the proverbial elevator, what would your perspective on lean and digital be for your CEO?
It's a digital enabled transformation. We can't wait to be there, but we have to start from the problem and the business priorities and not from the technology. That will drive the next step of performance in productivity, quality, sustainability, and service. And it's a people-centered transformation.
Got it. So I'm going to cut it down to 15 seconds each. Eduardo, you go next.
Okay, I would say to him that digital transformation can be a differentiation to the competition, and can drive value to customers and automatically drive better results and better financial stats for our company in future. And it's one of the pillars for future.
Got it. Marcos?
I would say that it's all about purpose. First, you need to clarify your company purpose, and then technology follows. Simply that.
Rogerio?
Yeah, on the line of developing digital as a people element center on that. So we definitely need to develop a digital culture, just not to be careful in terms of doing projects on digital, but developing a digital culture as a competitive advantage.
Very nice. And Jeff, I leave the final word to you on this. You've talked to many, many CEOs.
So I would say that we have been working hard at developing our people, and particularly their ability to solve problems quickly and effectively. That's not going to become less important with digital. It'll actually become more important as we have more and better information.
Perfect. So it's all about people. That's the cultural question we started with. So I wanted to thank you all for a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot from this. I hope the audience as well. And talk to you very soon here. Take care, everybody. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you benefited from the expertise of this group here. Take care. Bye-bye.